This is not an elitist issue. This is a quality of life issue. You want to tell people that their concern and their desire for clean air and clean water is elitist? Tell that to the kids in the South Bronx, which are suffering from the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. Tell that to the families in Flint, whose kids have their blood is ascending in lead levels. Their brains are damaged for the rest of their lives. Call them elitists.
Whoa. That was the now viral clip of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responding to claims that climate change is an elitist problem. The comments came after the Senate rejected her Green New Deal proposal by a vote of 57-0. Senator Ed Markey had something to do with that too. In fact, 43 of the 47 Democratic senators, including 6 running for president, voted present. They accused Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of setting up the issue as a sham vote in the Senate. Nevertheless, AOC is taking American politics by storm. Joining us today to discuss that and a lot more is Democratic pollster and senior associate at ALG Research, Pia Nargunkar, and Republican pollster and partner at the Terrence Group, BJ Martino. I want to start doing these announcements like an NBA announcer. From the bench, BJ Martino.
Let's get ready to run.
Yes. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a rising star in the Democratic Party, and on social media, the clip we just saw has been viewed approximately 14 million times since Tuesday. She has garnered a ton of attention, particularly from conservative media. According to an analysis by the Washington Post, AOC is the second most mentioned Democrat on Fox News. That's after Senator Elizabeth Warren. So with that as a backdrop, we wanted to know, do Americans think AOC is good or bad for the Democratic Party? We found that 4 in 10 voters are still trying to figure her out, but AOC elicits strong responses from the 60% of people who do have an opinion. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez is polarizing among those who are aware of her. Close to 6 in 10 think she's bad for the Democratic Party. That includes people who are both independent, Republican, and Democrat. So let's look at the partisan breakdown. As you can expect, only 10% of Democrats think she's bad for the Democratic Party, but 38% of independents and 63% of Republicans feel that way. Why do they think she's so bad? Well, we asked those folks to tell us why in a word or phrase, and they thought that, 1, socialism, leftist ideals, and radical are the words that popped out most. Looking at the flip side, 48% of Democrats and 15% of independents think she is good for the Democratic Party. But when you take away those Democrats who don't have an opinion of her, that number jumps to 83% of Democrats who think she's good for their party. And why do those folks like her? The phrases most commonly used were fresh ideas, she's a person of the people, and she's strong. So, Pia, what do you think is resonating with Democrats as we've seen from some of these word clouds when it comes to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman from New York?
Absolutely. I think she represents the next generation of Democrats. She's young, she's a woman, she's a person of color, and she's unafraid to talk about these big progressive ideals, whether it's the Green New Deal or taking Amazon out of New York. She's fiery and she's good at social media, and I think Democrats want more of that.
Do you think they agree with her on all the policy, or they just like her style?
I think some people obviously agree with her. There's a big progressive base of the Democratic Party that likes her ideas. I think not everyone agrees with her ideas, but I think everyone can agree that that sort of freshness is desired in the party.
Yeah, so what do you see looking at it from the other side of the fence?
Well, both parties need to have a foil. They need to identify who is going to be the villain in the story for the next election. And for Republicans, it's been Nancy Pelosi for well over a decade.
Right.
That storyline sort of played itself out now. And so you can begin to see, why Fox News is beginning to focus on some presidential candidates, beginning to focus on AOC more, because we need to identify who's going to be that lightning rod going forward. She, in many ways, is the new leadership, the shadow government of the Democratic Party in Congress. She drives the agenda in some ways. She's a disruptor within the Democratic Party and our larger political system. And that's a lot of what that appeal is among Democrats, that being able to push back against the establishment. For Republicans right now, this is all about image. If you look at some of the numbers that Quinnipiac just came out with, the fave-unfave number is the same as this question of whether or not she's good for the Democratic Party. Republicans aren't answering the meta question, is she good for the Democratic Party? they're responding to how I'm feeling about her personally right now. And we're building up her persona and her agenda as something that's going to be a foil going into the 20 midterm and presidential elections.
I think it's interesting that their foil is not Bernie Sanders, who's been an outspoken man with some of the same ideals that Elizabeth Warren or Ocasio-Cortez have, but it's these two women who are in particular dominating the coverage at Fox.
Well, and what's going to happen when you get a Republican, this was the challenge for the strategy, is what's going to happen when you get a Democratic candidate for president, somebody who's clearly going to be the standard bearer. Are you going to be able to differentiate on the Republican side? You've been building up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and now you got to deal with Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren or somebody else who's now the Democratic nominee. Is that going to be confusing to voters?
I mean, I think it's the playbook that they've used for Nancy Pelosi for years. It's Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi. It'd be interesting to see if they try to tie her to this, freshman candidate, and it's whatever presidential nominee and AOC.
Right.
We'll see if it works.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's going to be hard for them to keep it up on this two-step?
She is going to have a primetime spot at the Democratic National Convention in 2020. And she's going to give a speech that is going to make that room explode. And the Democratic nominee is going to have a hard time living up to the amount of natural energy she brought to the room. And that's a problem for a Democratic nominee.
Yeah, okay, we'll see. We've got a little bit more. As we mentioned earlier, Ocasio-Cortez garners a lot of attention from Fox News, significantly, more than fellow Democratic socialist Bernie Sanders, as Pia was just talking about. Our poll found that a lot more Republicans have opinions about AOC than Democrats do. 42% of Democrats in our poll had no opinion, while just 28% of Republicans didn't know what they thought. That's a 14-point gap. So, BJ, why are Republicans focusing so much on her? She's a freshman in Congress who hasn't been able to push through legislation, but last night we saw even Donald Trump Jr., who was in Grand Rapids at this rally, we saw him taking after AOC, and we got a little bit of that sound we want to take a look at right now.
Think about the fact that every mainstream leading Democratic contender is taking the advice of a freshman congresswoman who 3 weeks ago didn't know the three branches of government. I don't know about you guys, but that's pretty scary. You guys, you're not very nice.
So, Donald Trump Jr. gets people chanting and all worked up about AOC. Is this just a crowd rally favorite?
Well, clearly Don Jr. doesn't have his father's natural gift for inciting a specific rallying cry that's going to be the one that goes forward. We're still workshopping that, I'm sure. But she is going to be that foil going forward in the next cycle for months coming on. And it's not just who she is, but it's these policies as well. And you can see in the word cloud that you all did in the HarrisX poll, when you look at those who think she's bad for the Democratic Party, it is not about her persona. It is about policies. Their socialist is writ large across those verbatim responses to that question. And for especially a lot of older voters, that's a big problem. Now, again, that term doesn't have that same negativity.
So I'm not going to let you off the hook on here, because Pia brought up something that we really got to put on the table. Bernie Sanders is a socialist, a Democratic socialist. Why is it that they're going after AOC? Could race and gender be playing a role here?
I think it's more about age. And Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, who's not a candidate yet, but still yesterday's news. Unless or until they begin to catch fire, which I don't think either one of them are going to in the Democratic primary, they don't get that sort of attention and focus from Fox News. They're only those who are viewed as a threat. It should be a red badge of courage for Democratic candidates. One, you get to fundraise off of it, and two, it identifies you as someone who is a threat.
Now, Pia, I got to ask you, we saw in the Senate these senators who who voted present instead of voting for the Green New Deal. Is it possible that the policies that AOC puts on the table are going to give the Democrats some flux Are they going to be feeling a little bit like they don't know which way to go when the policies get put up for votes?
I do think there's sort of a debate in the Democratic Party right now. Are we going to push for these progressive ideals, or are we going to try to do more centrist policies? And I think if you look at the public polling, the public actually supports a lot of these policies when you strip away the language, calling it socialist, labeling it, Medicare for all or whatnot. The policies that we're talking about are incredibly popular.
So then why didn't the Democrats vote for it when it came up for a vote in the Senate?
That's part of the problem. You can't take away the labeling and the socialism calling and Mitch McConnell's maneuvering, and so it's hard to isolate that. And so I think that the vote was more in reaction to all that sort of political drama as opposed to the actual policy.
Okay. Going back to our poll once more, we noticed there's a much higher percentage of men who have an opinion about AOC than women. 50% of women say they have no opinion of her, while just 23% of men say the same. Is this an effect of men being more Republican, men following politics more, sexism, or do men just like to have opinions about stuff, even when they don't know the answers? I'm looking at you.
Let me pick my words carefully here. I do think that AOC's race and gender are a large part of the specific reaction to her, even more so than her policies that she shares with a lot of other Democratic politicians.
Yeah, and it does seem that men just seem more comfortable expressing themselves on this topic.
On any topic, frankly, we're open to giving an opinion whether we've thought about it or not in advance. And you see that in polling. Men tend to just give an opinion, produce something in a poll result, whereas women are more likely to be thoughtful and say, well, maybe I'm unsure at this point. I haven't learned enough to form an opinion. Men will just...
So I know we're not talking about him right now, but when you say that, the person who comes to mind the most is Donald Trump. Because sometimes it feels like someone asks him a question and he's just like that guy sitting at the bar who's like, yeah, let me tell you about Mexico. And he hasn't read anything about Mexico. He just has some kind of base opinion that just popped in his head.
Well, it's the traditional political training that says if you don't know the answer, give an answer to a question you wish someone had asked.
Right.
Whereas the president just is willing to just go off and address directly whatever he's asked, for good or for ill.
And the challenge for the Republican government, for the Trump government, is sometimes I think he says things the government hasn't quite thought through. They got to figure out how to make what he just said true.
Absolutely, whether it's healthcare or immigration or the wall. Yeah.
All right, so we got more of that coming up. The Mueller report is done. The Barr summary is out. What's the political impact? Talk about that next on What America's Thinking.